Hey guys, welcome back to the Impetus Health Podcast. This is going to be an awesome episode. I am joined today with Dr. Lauren Potter, who is a physical therapist with us with Vulcan Performance Rehab and Recovery. She's at our Inverness location, and she is our Pelvic Health Specialist. So today we're going to get into Lauren's kind of history and how she started to nerd out on the body, because Lauren is a body nerd, which is really cool. We all kind of are. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about a little bit of how she got curious into the pelvic PT side of things. So, hi Lauren, how are you doing?
Wonderful.
Glad to have you here. So, let's get into it. So, let's go back to like baby Lauren days, and let's talk about how did you first kind of dabble into athletics, into strength conditioning? How did all that start?
So I started off doing competition cheerleading and then realized that I wanted to play soccer. So once I got into soccer, all I knew was play soccer and run. No one ever really told me anything about resistance training. So when I wasn't at practice, when I wasn't at practice, I was only running. So I really started having different injuries because that was all I ever did.
How old were you at this point?
I started playing soccer in middle school. So
So competition cheer was middle school too.
Competition cheerleading was elementary and middle school.
Wow, so you were into it. That's really good.
Oh, yeah.
So you're in a cheer facility right now, so that's pretty cool. So you were like a baby cheerleader doing this stuff, and then you got into soccer with it too. Okay, that's awesome. So when you were doing the cheer side of things, how old were you when you started shifting more to soccer?
About 10.
10. So you quit doing competitive cheer at that point and moved on to soccer. Okay.
Yeah.
When did the injury start?
More so in high school.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So take us there.
Whenever I was in high school and kind of had more of the injuries, I started really loving learning more about the body in my anatomy classes. And so that was kind of my first moment of realizing, oh, this is kind of really neat. I want to learn more about it and how things work together. So that was my first little glimmer that I might want to go into athletic training or physical therapy. So that's where that all started.
So you had true anatomy in high school.
I did.
I did not. Most people, I mean, I'm from a very small school, so I guess I could see that, but I had no anatomy until I got to college. So when you started playing soccer, was it with cheerleading or with soccer that you started to have the injuries?
More so with soccer.
With soccer, okay. And how old would you say you were when you started?
Probably around like 15 or 16, I would get random overuse injuries because I played year round and never really did anything to take care of my body whenever I did have a little bit of off time.
Okay. So what, I guess, and you said this, but y'all were doing nothing for strength conditioning. You were just running and playing soccer.
Before high school soccer, I would get 1 week of resistance training right before we jumped into the season, and that was it.
Okay. And then high school soccer, though, they converted a little bit, did more strength conditioning, it seems like.
Only in that 1 week before
1 week?
The season, yeah.
What did that 1 week look like that would bulletproof you for an entire year? What was that?
It was did not bulletproof us, but they literally had us in the gym working on squatting, holding a dumbbell, doing push-ups. 1 year they did have us doing some formalized strength and conditioning where it was more so doing ladder drills.
But for 1 week?
It was just 1 week.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So did they ever talk to you guys about nutrition?
No.
Okay. So there's a lot of holes here.
Oh, yeah.
And you started having some, I'm guessing, annoying injuries, smaller injuries. What did those look like at the time?
Mostly just muscle strains, a calf injury, hip flexor strain, just different kind of stuff like that I was able to play through, but it definitely impacted my performance.
Okay, gotcha. So I guess I'll paint a picture too of how Lauren now. So Lauren does CrossFit now. She's working through some of the CrossFit-esque stuff that we all worked through because you started doing CrossFit in the past
5 months? 5
months. Okay. Yeah. So she's kind of been into functional fitness, moved into more of the CrossFit methodology, which is very different. And it will tear your body up a little bit if your body's not used to it. So that's kind of where she is now. But prior to this, with soccer and sports and all that, when did you start to get into fitness? I know you said like in high school you had the anatomy classes and that made you want to learn more about the body. Mm-hmm. So how did that correlate into fitness or in strength conditioning, and when did that start?
Really, I wouldn't say I did any kind of resistance training until I hit 20.
Yeah.
So whenever I was done playing soccer and I started college, all I knew how to do was run. So I'd go for a run every so often, but I didn't understand the point of continuing to do exercise because all I knew was the exercise associated with sport. I didn't know you're supposed to do it just for general health and wellness.
Yeah.
So I actually signed up for a weight training for PE. And that was the time where I knew I'd have to work out a couple days a week. And so that was kind of my first little introduction to some formalized fitness time.
I love that. So, and that's probably the majority of people. Like, I mean, I had zero clue what I was doing, what I was doing for strength conditioning when I played college basketball. I had no idea. And I think that's probably like most people, like, I know I need to work out, but I don't know what I need to do. So you start taking the PE class. Is that when you started learning what else you could do to work on your body, or how did all that come along?
I was super nervous in the beginning doing it. I really didn't know how to start, so I'd kind of watch what other people were doing during the class and kind of copy some of their movements just so I can learn new things. But really, I wouldn't say it was whenever I met my husband and he was doing more strength training that he started actually taking me to the gym with him, showing me how to use machines, helping me figure out that you could kind of do workout splits and work on different body parts. So that was kind of my first time of really learning how to enjoy doing fitness. And then the functional fitness side of things, I got into that more so during COVID because we didn't have access to a gym. So my husband would do lots of workouts at home. We got some tugboat rope, and we would throw that over our shoulder, and he'd have me go up and down the stairs, walking laps around the neighborhood. So that was kind of my first time really doing kind of functional fitness.
I love that. Okay, so you met Ben when you were in college, right?
Yeah,
was
I did.
This at Georgia?
Yeah, so we were both working at a Dick's Sporting Goods in Athens, so that's how I met Ben.
That's wonderful. That's great. So at Georgia, at Dick's Sporting Goods, you meet Ben.
Yep.
It sounds like Ben was doing more bodybuilding if he's doing splits. Okay, was it more like that in the beginning?
In the beginning he was, and then he kind of started doing a lot more functional fitness things too, and he took me along in that journey with him, which is great.
What did that look like? What did functional fitness look like before COVID for you guys?
So really for me, I wasn't doing a lot of the functional fitness before COVID, but he was. I mean, he'd be doing compound lifts at the gym, power cleans, and everything that I had never touched before.
Gotcha.
And so he was a lot more comfortable with those kind of movements, and then started teaching me how to do them along the way.
And Ben is a firefighter, and he's been a firefighter for how long now?
4 years.
4 years.
So
okay.
That was really when I got into the functional fitness, is when he started training to go through recruit school. He had to do more functional fitness because it's not just all bodybuilding. It's a lot more than just power cleans. You have to be able to take odd shaped objects, carry them, and move in weird positions. So he was training his body for that, and then kind of scooped me along and brought me through that process too.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things that you did, and one of the things that caught my eye when you first introduced yourself, was that Lauren has done some tactical training, or tactical, you'll have to walk me through what this is exactly, but it's tactical training for firefighters. And it's a very, what firefighters go through is so niche. I had a guy in here the other day in PT, and we were talking through, and he's a firefighter as well. And he was talking about he actually had to go into a house and do some stuff where there's smoke everywhere. And he talked about how he trains CrossFit, he trains functional fitness, and he was going in there to do it. But there's so much more added to it when you can't breathe, because I mean you have a ton of gear on, 50, 60, 70 pounds worth of gear, and it is smoky. So you have oxygen coming in, but it's still difficult because you're having to control your respiratory rate. There's so much that goes into it. So how did you getting into the tactical side of things look? And then what were you doing? What did that look like overall?
So whenever I was in physical therapy school, they had the first year of our PT program, a few students got the opportunity to go to one of the military bases and actually work with Coast Guard rescue swimmers, teaching them about injury prevention, mobility, and just kind of different things to help improve their job performance. And that was just an opportunity for us to have a chance to actually teach people some of the things that we've been learning.
Yeah.
And after that kind of put me in a position to then be able to apply for a graduate assistant position, where we were actually creating course curriculum for tactical athletes. So cool. What that looked like really in that first year, the years before me had already created all the base information for tactical athletes, kind of more so geared towards Army. So my year, we were in the process of making it an online course. So through that, people who are active duty military, whether they are here or deployed, they can log in and take our course, and they can learn about injury prevention, programming, periodization, and everything specific to the military.
Yeah.
And with that, they can promote in the military too. So,
and this is all through, you went to St. Augustine's.
I went to Georgia Southern in Savannah.
Southern. Yes, it was. Okay. Gotcha. So, shout out to Georgia Southern. This is great then, man.
It was really awesome. Yeah. So then as we were progressing through that, we started realizing that we need to convert this to all tactical athletes. That's including military, fire, police, everything. So I got to do a lot of the research, more so geared towards the firemen, because I had a special interest in it with my husband being a fireman.
Absolutely.
So I did a lot of that research, and we were basically just kind of converting everything over because it's different. So
From military to fire. So what are some of those differences? Talk about that.
So military versus fire. In the fire, like you said, you do have the differences as far as your vision's blocked a lot of the times too. You're in an environment where you really can't breathe. You're wearing the mask, you're wearing air, and also you're crawling around on the floor while wearing all your gear. Plus you have to go in like carrying a lot of other stuff too. So definitely the military in itself is an unpredictable environment, but with fire, it's an unpredictable environment in a different way too you're literally going into a position where you can't see. You're kind of searching for stuff and bringing people out. You don't know what the layout of the house is. So you're just you have to be able to handle various situations. So,
So what did a tactical training program look like for what you were doing? You were setting these programs up, and I'm guessing you were going around to some of the local fire stations. None of that. Okay. So what did the program look like?
So more so what it looked like is, so the big section that I focused on was looking at what muscle groups, how can we train different things to help with load carrying? So what muscle groups might tend to fatigue? What do we really need to work on strengthening? What are some options for exercises that people can do also to help kind of counterbalance the load that they're carrying? So that's a lot of what I was looking up to.
Gotcha. Okay. So you took all the tactical training, which is so cool. Like I love, there's this whole thing called the tactical games, which I don't know if you've ever looked into that or seen that, but it's just the coolest stuff, but how they train. It's pretty much like CrossFit meets something very functional. Like I've got to carry this really heavy fire hose for 200 yards. I've got to drag this body for 200 yards and stuff like that, which is so cool to me. But you've took all the tactical experience. You're applying it to your functional fitness training. So how did you take what you learned from the tactical stuff and apply it, or maybe Ben himself too, because Ben's going through this with you. So how did you guys apply this to how you worked out?
So prior to going through it, because the big thing too with a tactical athlete program we're creating, there's something called the TSAC-F. So it's basically like a strength and conditioning certification, but it is specific to tactical athletes. So it's really the military equivalent of a CSCS. Okay. So with that programming, we were able to kind of see different ways to challenge the body. So I saw different variations of how to strengthen. That was the first time I really learned about what's an anti-rotation core exercise, what's an anti-extension core exercise. Those are things I'd never been exposed to before. So as I started learning how to break down the deadlift, how to break down the squat a little bit differently, I started trying more of those things in the gym and really exposing myself to it. So that way, when we did do courses, we had labs where they might be asking questions. I needed to know, what does it actually feel like if I'm going to be answering questions on it too. So really it was just kind of taking different variations of exercises and trying it out. That's kind of how I got more exposed to it.
Yeah, good. And I think that's, in my opinion, I think that what makes a good practitioner is you've put your body in very similar situations to what the person who's training it is going through. So on that regard, the tactical training that you had, and not even the tactical training, but your background in functional fitness, how do you take all that and apply it to what you're doing now as a PT? How do you throw in anti-rotation stuff as a PT? We all do it, but it's honestly in the field itself, I don't think it's commonly thought of overall. So how do you implement that in what you do?
Really, a lot of times when people are thinking about core strengthening, they'd mostly just think about only doing sit-ups and planks, but they don't think about the fact that the core, it's a big thing there is they're trying to create stability. So when we are doing things like power cleans, deadlifts, we can have that stability in the to protect the spine too. So doing the anti-rotation, anti-extension, I'm trying to teach people how to actually activate their core to counteract the load. So it's moving them through functional movement patterns, so it carries it more so over into what they're going to be doing in life or at the gym.
Amen. That is so good. Okay, so if you could go back to 15-year-old Lauren who's playing soccer, she's running all the time. If you could go back and change what you did and maybe add in some strength conditioning, add in some stuff that you would know, and I think this is great because I think this is most people's high school experience. Is you go, you play your sport, you don't really get much strength conditioning around it to bolster what you're doing in your sport. So if you could go back, how would you go back and change the program that you were doing, or just maybe nutrition wise? What are some things that you would try to do? I
would definitely implement resistance training. So I would have myself lifting 2 to 3 times a week to actually make myself a more powerful soccer player. I was all legs and had absolutely no upper body strength. And so I think had I been a little more balanced too, that would have helped me in my performance too. But again, just having some kind of resistance training and some variation in my movement patterns. Because yes, on the soccer field, you are cutting, changing directions and everything too. But all I knew how to do was run. And so had I actually done some kind of resistance training, I think that I would perform better and actually potentially, leveled up a little bit more so than the level that I was at when I was playing soccer. Nutrition-wise, I definitely was not taking in enough protein. I don't think I was eating enough in general to fuel what I was doing. But at that point in time, there wasn't really a lot of education, and no one was really saying, hey, as a young girl doing sports, you need to be eating enough. You need to make sure you're getting protein. You need to actually be doing resistance training. At that time, it was more so, how can you become the smallest version of yourself? Yeah. More so than, hey, be powerful and go play your sports. So I would have absolutely told myself that I needed resistance training.
Yeah. All right. So this is kind of a loaded question, and I'll preface with this. So this is one of the most researched fields in all of strength and conditioning physical therapy is injury prevention. Can we actually do something that limits the injuries that we receive? That's the question. And the research is quite inconclusive. We have all these indirect relationships to injury from a strength conditioning side of things, but there is really no direct relationship between if I do this, it prevents this. But anecdotally, we have some great case studies of people saying that, yes, it helps. So if you were to go back and implement strength conditioning while you're playing sports, while you're doing this, if only Ben would have came into your life, y'all could have dated for 5 years in high school. I don't know. But if you could go back and do some of that, do you think, and you can answer this however you want to, do you think you would have been less injured?
I think so. So really, most of my injuries are more so a muscle strain or some kind of overuse, I think, because of my muscle imbalances. I really do think that had I actually done something different and had some variation in what I was doing, that I would have had less injuries. Because if we're doing the same thing all the time, our body has no variety and no ability to adapt to things. So I do think that I would have been a little bit more resilient in many aspects had I actually done something else to kind of variety to what I was doing.
I like that. And you said muscle imbalances in there. Kind of go into that a little bit, because I think soccer is one of the soccer and baseball. And I mean, all sports-specific stuff, you're going to have muscle imbalances, but those two sports in particular seems to have it because you're dominant leg kicking. Like, how go into that a little bit on muscle imbalances?
So definitely, because if you are only able to kick with your right leg, then you're going to have differences in mobility from one side to the other, or you're going to have a strength deficit if you have more power in one leg where you're always swinging to kick. I had fewer muscle imbalances because when I did get injured, I was forced to have to use my other leg a little bit more. And that was kind of a learning curve too, on trying to figure out, how do I actually coordinate this? But I think in soccer players, there is definitely differences in hip strength, because if you're only ever kicking with one leg and you're never actually building up your strength and teaching your body how to do the same thing on both sides, you're going to have a difference in power output. You're going to have a difference in strength and potentially just in general mobility.
Absolutely. So now you're doing this sport or this side of health and wellness, this CrossFit, and CrossFit's methodology is constantly varied. That is it, constantly varied and ever changing. So how would you compare what you're doing now to the way you have traditionally trained in the functional fitness side? How compare and contrast the two?
I would say now there's a whole lot more variety to my workouts, and I'm actually able to lift stronger than I ever have before, mostly because I was holding myself back for fear of failure. When I'm working out in a CrossFit gym too, it's okay if I fail a lift or if I have to drop the weight, versus in a traditional setting, you have to be a little more careful because
you're frowned upon.
Absolutely. If you're making loud noises, or if you are dropping the weight because you failed a lift, you're going to have management come over and say, hey, kind of keep it down a little bit. This is a quiet gym where we're trying to keep a certain vibe. So definitely a lot more variety. I am stronger now than I ever have been, and
let's go.
I love it.
So you think that's such I've never heard that take. So you actually think you're stronger than you ever have been because the fear of failure is not there, and really the fear to disturb the peace is not there.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. I've never heard someone say that.
That, and I'm in a place where I see what other people are able to lift. I'm like, well, if they can do that, maybe I can do it. So I'm going to try to do a little bit more. Or I've got coaches who are encouraging me that, hey, I really think you could do a little bit more than that. And it's a safer place, in my opinion, to kind of try it and just see what you're able to do.
That's good. I like that. I've never heard somebody say that. I can totally see it. That's great. Okay, so you're doing CrossFit. You're into all this stuff now. You're using functional fitness in how you treat on the physical therapy side. Then we kind of throw in this whole pelvic health spectrum, which to a lot of people, it seems like we have physical therapy and then we have pelvic health, and they don't seem to coalesce, which I believe they coalesce a whole lot. There's a lot of crossover there. So tell us a little bit about why you got into pelvic health, and also where you think there is, why it's not just this alien foreign thing that we're looking at over here.
So when I first started physical therapy school, I didn't even know that pelvic health was an option. I had heard it mentioned, but it kind of seemed a little bit odd and weird to me because I didn't know anything about it. And really, as I started going through school and almost having my own experience where I was having a little bit of pelvic pain, and I had a physician say, well, that sucks. People have pain. You kind of have to get over it.
Wow.
Too bad. Women have pain all the time. And so that really bummed me out. And so as I got in through PT school and I learned that there was an option of pelvic floor physical therapy, and I started realizing how many different things it could reach. So yes, we can work with pelvic pain, but we can also work with urinary incontinence, urinary frequency and urgency, and all these things that are actually kind of awkward and potentially embarrassing topics to talk about.
Yeah.
Something about that kind of piqued my interest. I was like, I like the weird thing. I want to learn more about that because nobody else really does. And if there is this whole other group of people out there who are having an issue that they need help with and they don't have someone that they can access easily, I want to be that person.
Absolutely.
So the disconnect, I think, a lot of times is that people see the pelvic floor as a delicate area that can't really be loaded, or that it's kind of inaccessible, or we have to only isolate those muscle groups to really work on strengthening them. I think that is kind of where the downfall of pelvic floor therapy is sometimes, when people aren't getting properly loaded.
Absolutely.
So there is so much research to show that if we just strengthen the hips, we're going to make a huge difference in pelvic floor function. So we can take the same functional fitness approach that we are to any kind of orthopedic injury or condition and apply the same thing to pelvic floor physical therapy. And that's really the thing that we're doing that's different, I think, in a lot of places, is that people aren't loading patients when we're trying to treat the pelvic floor. They're just kind of doing isolated table exercises.
Functional pelvic floor therapy.
I love it.
That's awesome. We're going to do a whole nother podcast on pelvic floor stuff. So if you're interested, you can check that out. But I guess the last thing I really want to talk about with the pelvic floor before we go too far into it is what would you say are the most common themes that women are facing with pelvic floor issues in general? If you can have like a list of 3 things, what would you say?
I would say the incontinence with activity. So whether that's jumping, sneezing, really heavy resistance training, generalized pelvic pain, and then also just a lot of frequency and urgency. Those are the 3 big things that I think a lot of people have trouble with, but they don't actually realize that pelvic floor PT is a thing that can help them.
Mm-hmm. Hey guys, if you are listening to this conversation with Lauren and I, and you are thinking, this is me, I need help with this, I have pelvic floor issues, and I think this could really help, reach out to us. We have a whole division of our company is Vulcan Pelvic Health Physical Therapy, and we do exactly the things that we're talking about. Lauren is our specialist in this. She focuses entirely on the woman's needs when it comes to this particular field, and she does a great job of it. She can help you avoid some of the things that we're talking about. How do you become less frequent? How do you stop the leakage? If you're having pain, we can do a lot of stuff with that. So if you have questions about this, please reach out to us. I will put the link in the description of how to get in touch with us as a physical therapy company. And then once you reach out, we'll give you a call. Lauren may even call you herself, and she'll walk you through what to expect and how we're going to go about helping you. So if you have any questions about this, Lauren's information is also in the description. Please reach out to us and we'll do everything we can to help you. Thanks.
I've heard a stat that 1 in 4 women struggle with kind of the incontinence side of thing when they're working out or whatever they're doing. And I'll go around and I'll meet people and we'll talk about some pelvic floor stuff randomly, and I'll be like, yeah, I've heard 1 in 4 women, and they'll kind of laugh and say 1 in 4, and we're like 1 in 1. Like I've heard I've heard that several times now. I really don't know what the statistics say on it. You may know, but there's such a need for this, and I think you're right. We've made it this this alien sector that we don't know anything about. And it's not that. We actually know a ton about this, and we can do a lot with it. And man, the women who actually do undergo pelvic health PT, and especially the way we like to think we're doing it with functional pelvic health PT, they have tremendous results, and they can leave this stuff in the past. This doesn't have to be the rest of your life. Every time you do a double under, you don't have to be afraid. But yeah, that's awesome. So I guess to wrap it all up with all this and kind of your whole summary, if you had to kind of, I guess, summarize your journey in one thing, because you started off, before you really get into the body a lot, you didn't really know much about strength and conditioning at all. Where would you say, how has the journey been from not knowing anything to now you're this practitioner focused on pelvic health, but really focusing on the functional and the foundational side of movement as you go into that? So I guess if you had to like pinpoint your journey along the way, how would you say you've grown so far? Very difficult question. I could have phrased that better.
I would say whenever I first started into fitness as a kid, I thought it was just something you do for the competition of it. Like you do a sport and that's kind of it. I didn't know that there was a side to fitness, resistance training that was just kind of for overall mental health, physical health, and everything on that side of it too. So as I've grown and really developed in the fitness world, that's the biggest thing I see is that you can do it for fun. You can enjoy the competitive side of it with CrossFit. You have to find the way that you like to do fitness, because that's going to be what you're actually going to stick with. So that I would say that's the biggest way that I've grown. And I've tried so many different forms of exercise over the years, and it's really kind of figuring out what do I like and what do I want to stick with, because I want to do it for fun. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the journey I would say I've taken.
And you mentioned the mental side of it. We don't talk about that enough, but to me, man, working out helps my mental health so much. And
absolutely. That's really what kept me doing it in PT school. I realized that when I would actually exercise, I felt like I got to do something for me other than just going through and studying all the time. This is a moment where I got to do something that I enjoyed, and I felt so much less stressed when I actually prioritized that too.
Absolutely. We're given these bodies. We've got to steward them appropriately. So I'm with you on that totally. Okay. Well, awesome. Well, Lauren, this was great. We're going to have Lauren back. For Lauren and I, it'll be in about 5 minutes, but for you guys, it'll probably be next week. So we'll talk about the pelvic floor in the next episode. But thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.